you can see, today I'm not at work. I have some time off and I decided to just take today and just decompress and talk about a specific topic, something that I saw a lot, or I've seen a lot so far during my ICU rotation. And it's something that I didn't know much about. So I haven't done one of these kind of videos in a while, but I thought since I have the day off today, I will just discuss one of these topics. And the topic in particular is pulmonary hypertension. So with nothing further to do, let's jump into the video. By the way, if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button, and also if you find the video helpful or if you find that you enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that a lot. Okay, so what exactly is pulmonary hypertension? Most people are aware of when you say they've got hypertension in particular. Hypertension is when your heart has to work overtime, or your blood pressure as we know it is higher than the normal amount. We typically say when the top number, that's the systolic blood pressure, is above the number 140, then we say you've got high blood pressure. Or when the diastolic, which is the lower number, is above 90, then we say you've got high blood pressure. The same kind of idea applies to pulmonary hypertension. So when people talk about normal hypertension, they're mostly talking about the left side of the heart. Pulmonary hypertension has to deal with the right side of the heart. Let's take things back a little bit and let's briefly talk about how blood flow works in the body. So first of all, the heart has 4 chambers. There are 2 on the right and 2 on the left, as well as 2 on top and 2 on the bottom. The 2 on top are known as the atrium. They're your filling chambers, and the 2 on the bottom are known as your ventricles. They're the pumping chambers. So blood comes from the body back onto the top filling chamber on the right side of the heart. It then goes into the bottom chamber on the right side of the heart, and from there that gets pumped into the lungs. Oxygenation happens. Hold up, I'm actually kind of thirsty, so I'm just gonna sip on my coffee while I let you guys watch this National Geographic video that's going to actually explain the movement of blood and oxygenation pretty well.
A pumping cycle starts when oxygen-depleted blood returns to the heart after circulating throughout the body. The blood enters through the right atrium before flowing to the right ventricle. It's then pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary arteries. There, blood is rejuvenated by air that's breathed in. The oxygen-rich blood returns to the heart through the left atrium, where it goes to the left ventricle. Then, by way of the aorta artery, the fresh blood is pumped throughout the body before the process repeats itself.
There's a formula that we use in medicine to calculate and figure out the cause of what's causing high blood pressure. MAP, which is your mean arterial pressure, that practically signifies your blood pressure, is equal to your cardiac output times your systemic vascular resistance. The cardiac output is made up by heart rate times stroke volume. Heart rate is how fast your heart's pumping, and stroke volume is how much blood the heart pumps out with each contraction. The same idea and the same gist applies to when we say pulmonary hypertension. When the right side of the heart has to pump blood against more resistance towards the lung aspect. When the right side of the heart is seeing more volume, more blood than normal, that could also lead to pulmonary hypertension. When the left side of the heart is failing, and that eventually leads to more backflow of blood from the left side towards the right side, that leads to more resistance on where that right side has to pump. And again, that also could lead to pulmonary hypertension. If the vessels that the right side has to pump towards is narrowed for whatever reason, that could lead to pulmonary hypertension. For whatever reason, there's a problem with the lung. If the lung is too stiff and the right side of the heart has to pump blood across that stiff lung, then again, that could also lead to pulmonary hypertension. For pulmonary hypertension, the definition is typically when the mean pulmonary arterial pressure is greater than 20, and the normal for that is about 10 to 14. When I think about pulmonary hypertension, I typically think of it in two big subtypes. It could be pre-capillary or post-capillary. With pre-capillary pulmonary hypertension, the problem is typically before the capillaries. When you measure the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, which is a pressure that we use to look at the left side of the heart, that's typically normal because that side of the heart is normal. The problem is coming before the capillaries. With post-capillary pulmonary hypertension, the pressure on the left side of the heart, so when we measure the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, that's elevated. So that tells us that the problem is coming from that left side of the heart. So that's the first kind of like subgroup. After that, you then go into the 5 main classes of pulmonary hypertension. The first type is known as pulmonary arterial hypertension. So pulmonary arterial hypertension is the idiopathic cause of hypertension. This is anything that might have led to a remodeling of the pulmonary arteries. So things like HIV, hepatitis, genetic causes, some things like scleroderma, or anything that could just lead to a change in the arterioles of the pulmonary vasculature. Most times they lead to narrowing of the pulmonary vasculature, and this ends up resulting in pulmonary arterial hypertension. And then the second group of pulmonary hypertension is group 2, and this group is anything that's caused by, again, the left side of the heart. So this is similar to post-capillary pulmonary hypertension. So things like congestive heart failure, which include like HFrEF, which is heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction. That's when the heart's not pumping as well as it should. Or HFpEF, which is heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, which is when the heart's pumping as well as it should, but the heart has problems with filling. The heart's too stiff or too thick in that it can't fill well enough. So despite the fact that it's pumping well enough, if initially it was able to fill this much of blood, it's not only able to fill this much of blood, but still pump everything out, but that amount of blood is just not enough. And then that ends up leading to backup of problems on the right side of the heart. Group 3 is anything that is caused by the lung. So things like obstructive lung disease, things like COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So with the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, the pathophysiology behind why that leads to pulmonary hypertension is because the lungs are very smart. What happens when some part of the lungs aren't oxygenating as well as they should is the blood vessels that typically supply the bad part of the lungs will narrow, and the blood vessels that supply the good part of the lungs will dilate and open up. This is to optimize oxygenation, because if the blood vessels that supply the bad part of the lungs were still dilated, there won't be enough oxygen exchange going on. But if that narrows, you reduce the amount of blood going to that bad part of the lung, and you increase the amount of blood going into the good part of the lung. But the problem with that narrowing is that it then backs up, it leads to increased back pressure onto the right side of the heart. So because of that narrowed blood vessel, the right side of the heart now has to work extra and overtime. And then group 4 is anything that leads to the pulmonary artery being obstructed. So the most common cause for this is usually something known as pulmonary embolism, which is the blood clot in the pulmonary artery. And then the last group, which is group 5, is other multifactorial causes of pulmonary hypertension. So that's practically kind of like how I think about pulmonary hypertension, what I've learned so far about it. Feel free to leave any comments below if there's something that you don't fully understand. And then feel free to also, write anything you want in the comment on if you found this helpful, if you learned anything, if you didn't, if you thought it was too in-depth, if you thought it wasn't in-depth enough, if there was the part that you found confusing. Anyways, thank you all for taking the time to watch today's video. Really appreciate it. And if you haven't, again, please do hit that subscribe button. That would mean a lot. And also check out some of the other videos. And hopefully I'll catch you all on the next one. All right, take care. Peace.